Europe once ruled much of the world. Its empires spanned continents. Its armies shaped borders. Its ideas helped define the modern world. Today, Europe remains wealthy, advanced, highly educated, still one of the richest regions on Earth. And yet, militarily, it depends on the United States. Politically, it struggles to act decisively. And internally, it faces growing tensions over immigration, security, identity, and social cohesion. For a continent that once dictated the course of history, Europe now often looks like a civilization, struggling to preserve the very conditions that made it successful. So how did it get here? Because on paper, Europe should be one of the most powerful blocs on Earth. Its economy rivals America's. Its population is larger. Its technology, infrastructure, and institutions remain world-class. By most conventional metrics, Europe should be a geopolitical heavyweight. But power is not measured only by GDP. And increasingly, Europe looks like a region with enormous wealth, but declining strategic seriousness. A continent rich enough to matter, yet often too divided, too dependent, or too politically paralyzed to fully act like it. That paradox did not emerge overnight. After World War II, Europe made a rational bargain. Its leaders chose prosperity over power, reconstruction over militarization, economic integration over strategic independence, and under American protection through NATO. That seemed like a brilliant deal. Why invest heavily in defense when Washington was willing to guarantee your security? Why build hard power when someone else was handling the unpleasant realities of geopolitics? For decades, Europe prospered under this arrangement, but prosperity can breed complacency. And over time, Europe built a model optimized for peace, while assuming peace itself had become permanent. That assumption shaped everything. Europe integrated economically, but never truly unified strategically. Attempts to create a real European military force failed. National governments wanted the benefits of cooperation without surrendering meaningful control. So Europe built shared markets, shared regulations, shared institutions, but not shared hard power. It created the appearance of unity without the full substance of it. And that contradiction remains one of Europe's defining weaknesses, because the European Union is not a nation. It is a coalition of states with different interests, histories, priorities, and strategic cultures. Germany prioritizes differently from Poland. France thinks differently from the Baltics. Southern Europe prioritizes differently than Eastern Europe, and unsurprisingly, trying to build coherent grand strategy from 27 partially aligned governments is extraordinarily difficult, especially in moments of crisis. Europe's fragmentation is not temporary, it is structural. But fragmentation alone is not the whole story. Europe also suffers from a deeper problem, a growing disconnect between its governing class and the realities confronting the continent. For years, much of Europe's political leadership operated under the assumption that economic interdependence would reduce conflict, that liberal norms would naturally spread, that borders mattered less, that history itself had become less brutal. Reality has not been so cooperative, because while Europe embraced a post-historical worldview, the rest of the world did not. Russia, it's ferocious. China is strategic. The Middle East remained unstable. The United States remained power-driven. But parts of Europe behaved as though idealism had permanently replaced hard power, as though prosperity alone could sustain order, as though institutions could substitute for deterrence, as though good intentions could override incentives. History has a habit of punishing that kind of thinking. Nowhere has this tension become more visible than in immigration. In recent decades, Europe has experienced large waves of migration, particularly following instability in the Middle East and Africa. Immigration itself is not the only cause of Europe's internal tensions, but in many countries it has become the issue that has exposed broader institutional and political failures, because many European leaders sought rapid demographic and cultural change while seeming unprepared, or sometimes reluctant, to deal with the long-term consequences of letting any kind of immigrant into their countries. Concerns about integration, assimilation, border control, and cultural cohesion were often dismissed for years as exaggerated, unethical, reactionary, or politically inconvenient, until the negative effects of this policy of allowing any immigrant into Europe became impossible to ignore. In some countries, integration systems have failed. Parallel communities have emerged, generating increasing social tensions, high-profile crime incidents against the local population, and all of this has intensified public anxiety about the situation. This way, immigration has become associated in the public mind with broader fears about national identity, sovereignty, and social stability. This has transformed immigration from a political debate, which more ideologically driven politicians tend to criminalize instead of engaging in a fair civilizational debate. Because at its core lies a larger question: can a society remain cohesive if it loses confidence in its own values, borders, and identity? Europe seems increasingly uncertain about the answer. And while it remains undefined, the population is growing weary of the inaction of its politicians, who often appear weak and complacent. And this uncertainty has fueled political polarization across the continent. Nationalist parties have surged, traditional parties have weakened, progressive parties have lost credibility. Consensus politics has become harder, because Europe is now divided over what it wants to be: a post-national liberal project, or a civilization rooted in nations, borders, traditions, and historic cultural identity. That question remains unresolved, and unresolved identity crises rarely produce stable politics. All of this is happening as the world becomes harsher, more competitive, and less forgiving. War has returned to Europe. Great power rivalry has returned. China is rising, supposedly trying to take over the world. Russia is more aggressive, and the United States is increasingly focused elsewhere. Meanwhile, Washington has made one thing clear: American protection cannot be assumed forever, not without a price, which presents Europe with an uncomfortable reality. A continent that outsourced much of its hard power may soon need far more of it. Europe is not collapsing yet, but it is under a lot of pressure. Its vulnerabilities are not the result of one mistake, but of decades of trade-offs, complacency, fragmentation, and ideological overconfidence. It remains wealthy, it remains influential, but for the first time in centuries, Europe is confronting a world where prosperity alone may no longer be enough, and where the assumptions that shaped its post-war model are being tested by a far harsher reality. The question now is not whether Europe still matters. It does. The question is whether Europe can adapt fast enough to preserve its strength before its internal contradictions erode it further. Let me know what you think in the comments. If you made it this far, thank you for watching until the end. It means you're exactly the kind of person this channel is made for. If you enjoy content like this, consider subscribing and let me know in the comments. What should we explain next?